everybody, and welcome to another Florida-friendly landscaping educational program. Today, I am very excited about this particular topic because it is one of my favorites, and I had a really good time putting this information together. I'm by no means a entomologist, nor am I a bee expert, but finding out information and relaying it to you, I think helps you on your Florida-friendly journey, because if nothing else, it triggers things in your mind that says, hey, I want to learn more about this. And then you can go out and, have the resources to find out more information. So today we are discussing bee-specific flowers and plants that attract native bees. I am Lilly Browning. I do work for Hernando County Utilities in the Water Conservation Department. If you would like a PDF copy of this program, even if you're listening after it's recorded, that's fine too. Just email me, LillyB, LILLYB, at hernandocounty.us and say, I'd like a PDF copy of that bee-specific program because I want to see the links for the resources or go over, it again in my mind. No problem. That's one of the easiest things that I do for you. Here are the 9 principles of Florida-friendly landscaping. You see these all the time in my classes because one or more of these principles are, what we cover in all of our classes. The main one today is, of course, attract wildlife. And I've always told everyone that's probably my favorite of the principles, but they all do work together. And we are going to be discussing also right plant, right place. That always falls in there. A little bit, we're going to be talking a little bit about mulch and of course also manage yard pests responsibly. So what is the buzz on native Florida bees? Why are we discussing them? Why do we want to talk about them? Bees are fantastic. Bees are really, and it is said quite often, we wouldn't be here without bees. And that is true. They pollinate our food crops. That is mainly the honeybees, the European honeybees that are that commodity that helps keep us eating. But it all works together. And these native bees play an extremely important part in our ecosystem. So, and when it comes to pollinators out there, bees are it. Bees are the top of the pollinator chain. They are the most efficient pollinators out there. Every other pollinator, although extremely important because they all work together, are pretty much incidental pollinators. Even our beautiful butterflies, they're going about their business and they happen to have pollen on them and they pollinate some flowers as they do their thing. Most of these bees, they're created to pollinate. Some of them have bags that hold, pollen on their bodies. They're so hairy, a lot of them, that they tend to go from, in bunches of the same flowers from one to the other in a short period of time, just extremely efficient at pollinating. And believe it or not, we have over 320 species of native bees in Florida. That's species of native bees. The United States has over 4,000 native species. So that's really exciting, to hear about. And native bees, they vary in color, size, shape, and they tend to categorize the native bees in groups of very small, medium, large, and very large. Those are the categories they tend to put those kinds of native bees in. Now, the question, of course, that's going to come up as we are talking about any of these bees, you're going to question in your mind, do they sting? Of course, all bees are capable, all female bees are capable of stinging you. Generally, these native bees have to be way more provoked than your European honeybee does. You really, really, really have to, they have to feel ultra threatened. So, you know, of course they have the capacity to sting you, but they're not, if you leave them alone, they're going to leave you alone. Sometimes accidents happen. You get in their way without knowing it. You may end up being stung. So just knowing that, and there are different, you know, there are people out there who have some severe reactions to any bee sting. So of course, keep that in mind. Have your EpiPen with you, you know, be prepared. If you or a family member tends to have very strong reactions. One thing you want to keep in mind is honeybees have their barbed stingers. That's why when you hear, well, you know, when they sting you, they die. You know, it's the ultimate kamikaze kind of attack on you. It's a suicide mission to protect the hive because they have barbed stingers. They get stuck in you. So then when the bee pulls away, it gets ripped off, you know, and the bee ends up dying. These native bees do not have barbed stingers. It's just a smooth stinger that, so it can poke in and out multiple times, doesn't hurt the bee. But keep in mind, believe it or not, there is a sting index out there called the Schmidt Sting Index. And so sweat bees, which we're going to talk about, the index that goes for, I guess, goes from 1 to 2, and then 1.1, 1.2, 1.2. 2 is like what a honeybee sting feels like. So sweat bees are only at the 1. They're at the lowest, you know, pain level in the native bee world. And speaking of sweat bees, here they are. They are generally very small to medium. We are really lumping together, putting a lot of these species just in their lumps, sweat bees, minor bees, you know, all the different, because you got to remember from there, you could branch out to so many different kinds of bees. And if this encourages you to go out and study more about each of the types of bees, certainly do so. So sweat bees, they are very small to medium. We have 66 species of sweat bees in Florida alone, and they're pretty common. And so is sweat in Florida. So, you know, they are named appropriately. They are looking for the salts from your sweat and, you know, and the water too. So you may end up when you're working outside, you probably, you know, have felt something like, you know, on your chest or wherever you're sweaty, and you push them away. You know, 9 times out of 10 that you're not going to get stung doing that, but, you know, you could. But that's all that they're doing. They're not trying to sting you. They're like, ooh, look at this salty person. I want some of that salt. They're also nectar, and they take the nectar and they move the pollen around. They are also fantastic at pollinating, and they're so teeny tiny, some of them. This picture down here is a blown up picture of some fog fruit or frog fruit, or any one of multiple names that you can call it. They're tiny. Those who know that know this is a very tiny flower. So you can see, you know, what works with very tiny flowers? Very tiny bees. Some of them, like this one up here on this DYC, I'm going to explain in a little bit what a DYC is, but this bee is on a DYC. Is metallic looking, really pretty, green. And again, they are attracted to the salts in your sweat, hence their name. We also have out there, have you ever seen this happen to your rose bushes, maybe your azaleas, other things, these very neat holes cut out of, you know, look like almost a cookie cutter did it, of your leaves? Now you know who did that. That was one of our leaf cutter bees. These names are pretty descriptive. And And these bees are on the medium to large size. And we have 26 species of these guys or girls. This is a girl right here. This is a mama who went out and cut a piece of a leaf to look how big it is, you know, compared to her body. And where is she taking it? She's taking it to line her nest, to lay her eggs. But they look and see how hairy she is as well. So all this hair and this hair on her legs, you know, these lady bees don't believe in shaving because they have a job they need to do, and that is carrying the pollen from one flower to the next one. They, because they like the tubular kind of cavities, they may be ones who may use a bee house or, you know, a bee hotel, which we're going to look at one of those that you can create and have in your bee garden. Mason bees, again, very descriptive name because they make things out of mud. They tend to blind their nests with mud. So they are on the small to large family. I tried the best I could to get live pictures of the bees, but sometimes I wasn't all that successful. So sometimes you're going to have to deal with the University of Florida's or another sources, not quite live bee pictures, so you can see what they look like. There are 14 species of mason bees in Florida. They are solitary. Every one of our native bees, except one, is what we call solitary. Honeybees, they live in hives. That's what we're used to seeing. That's in our media, in all our storybooks, in all the commercials, everything, you know, we see hives of honeybees. They are very social. The only social native bee we will get to, that's a bumblebee, and they don't create hives. So these mason bees are solitary. Now they can all live together in something like this. Somebody created, this is a PVC pipe, and they put in these tubes for the bees to live in. So yeah, they each bee is going to go in one tube. So they're kind of together like in an apartment building, but they don't live together. They're considered solitary. They, you know, don't care if they're not with a whole group of other bees. So that also, unless they have their own little nest to protect, they're not as aggressive protecting the whole congregation of bees. But they're very, very pretty. You know, some of these are metallic or dark blue. Some are black with a white stripe. And again, they are ones that might occupy some sort of bee houses or hotels that you can create for them. Here's our friend. I've got a baby bumblebee. Here is our friend, the bumblebee. Probably everyone's second favorite bee. Those honeybees, they get center stage, but everyone also loves the bumblebees because they're cute. We do, as humans, have a tendency to decide emotionally whether we like something on whether or not, if it's appealing to us as humans for whatever, you know, reasons that we do that. But the bumblebees are large or to very large. It's another reason they're so recognizable. We've all seen them, you know, as kids, we've all done this. Might not have been very, very smart, but that will also tell you they're not very aggressive. They can and will sting you if they feel threatened. This says there are 6 species in Florida. That's the University of Florida information I got. In reading from wildflowers.org, which I highly recommend you go to their websites. They have lots of information about bees. They mention that, yeah, they're officially are 6, but and I wish I could remember their name, but I don't. But one of the, you know, families of bumblebees, one of the species, has not been seen in Florida since 1962. So that is, you know, has not been documented. So that is very sad. South Florida, if you're listening from South Florida, you're not going to see very many bumblebees. In the Keys, you don't have them at all. I love bumblebees. I think, they're fun to watch. As someone who likes to participate in nature photography, they're usually very accommodating for that. I didn't get this, but I wish I had taken that picture. No, I didn't get that picture. As I said before, they are our only social native bee, meaning they do live together in a nest, but they're not going to create the kind of papery hive or, live in the man-made hives that the honeybees are. They use existing cavities, usually in the ground, sometimes maybe in tree holes or something like that. A cavity that something else already created, such as a rodent or something like that, they'll move in to a cavity that's already created and live together socially in there. And they are large, and look how hairy. See, the hairier the bee, the more efficient at pollinating it is. And this lady, she has these pollen baskets on the backs of her legs. It's like her purse. It's her pollen purse. Every lady has to have a purse. So she's there shopping for pollen and, filling up her basket, to take home. So they are very, very efficient at it. Just like honeybees have the same kind of pollen baskets on the back of their legs. And they do have stingers, and they will sting if provoked. And again, only the honeybees have the barbed stingers. So our native bees, when they sting you, that's not killing them. And they'll come back to keep stinging you. But they're not aggressive. So, you don't hear stories of someone really being attacked by native bees. But be careful out there. And one of the cool things they do is buzz pollinate. They're so good at buzzing. So she's standing there on this flower, and it's a nice flat flower to stand on. We'll get into that. And without even moving her wings, she buzzes her whole body and shakes the pollen out. And, so that is really a cool thing that they do. And then it gets all over her and, able to be spread around. Carpenter bees. There's different types of carpenter bees, and they come from small ones to large ones. There's 5 species of carpenter bees in Florida, and they are wood-boring bees. Some people think, oh, they're going to destroy my house. Other people think, oh, look here, I've had these carpenter bee, the holes they drilled to put their nest in my porch post, for 10 years. Nothing terrible has happened. So I guess, you have to be the judge of the threshold of what you can put up with sharing your house, your shed, or whatever with them. Some of them, the large ones, do look like bumblebees, but they aren't as hairy. They're kind of more fuzzy than hairy. The smaller ones are more dark and shiny. And again, just like all of them, the females do have stingers. Watch out, men, the females do have stingers, but they rarely sting unless they are provoked. Longhorned bees. Were you even aware that we had so many types of bees in Florida? A longhorned group of bees can come from medium to large. There are 24 species of these in Florida. Some of them are specialists, like on sunflowers. Some of them only go to sunflowers. And we have one that goes to squash. It's called a squash bee. Now that would be very important for, a squash farmer to have around. And the females have very hairy hind legs. Again, those ladies just don't care about shaving because their very hairy hind legs have a very important work to do, moving that pollen around. And the males have that very long antennae, so very easily recognizable as a longhorned bee. Here's our digger bees or minor bees. They come from very small to large. Again, see, these are the kind of bees that live in holes in the ground. There's 63 species in Florida. These guys live in tiny holes in the ground. So don't think that I'm talking about yellow jackets. Those are wasps, and that is a whole different conversation to have. These native bees, they are ground nesting, and they are solitary to a point, you know, but they can live in large aggregations, again, like apartments almost, all in the ground together, but they are not thinking it's all for one, you know, like the honeybees. Maybe it's warmth or other, you know, predator protection, why they may live a bunch of them together, but they're each in their own little apartments. And you can have the Adrena mining bees, which are this small, which can be small to large. Perdita mining bees are very, very, very small. One of the species of mining bees, of the 63 species, worth mentioning is a southeastern blueberry bee. That's worth mentioning because it's a native bee that, whereas they'll go to many places to nectar, they just love blueberries. And we have, you know, native blueberries, native vaccinium growing in the woods. The berries are, you know, small and have a stone in them. So, you know, the animals like, you know, them, the native ones. But they have found out, because blueberry farming has become popular here in Florida, I'd say in the past 20 years, maybe a little longer, they have found varieties that will grow and make a good commercial crop in Florida. And of course, all those kind of farmers are either going to have or rent the honeybees to come and pollinate them. But they found out these southeastern blueberry bees, not only do they go to the native vaccinium plants, they will happily go to these commercial blueberry plants as well. So a really good backup. And when they do their work a shorter period of time than the European honeybees. But when they do the work, they do it more efficiently than the European honeybees. The only thing is, you know, they're not as manageable by, you know, by humans, because you can't create hives for them and carry them around like you can the European honeybees. But what you can do is create an environment around those farms, leave some open dirt to attract more of those bees. And of course, you can bring some in, but you have to have the environment for them as well to thrive. Then we have, sorry, I didn't get a live picture of this one either, the plasterer or the cellophane bees. I assume before 1940 something, they were only plasterer bees, but now we call them cellophane bees. They can be anywhere from very small to large. We have 26 species of these in Florida. Why do we call them cellophane bees? Because they make a like a substance to line their nests that looks like cellophane, which is why pre-cellophane, I guess they call them plasterer bees. And a couple of types, the colettes are black with light hairs and an often striped abdomen. This is what you have right here. Black with light hairs and a striped abdomen. And then there's the Hylaeus, which are the yellow-faced bees. Again, they are also solitary bees. Now we have these guys. Did I skip one? No. Now we have our cuckoo bees. Let me tell you, these guys are cuckoo. They can come anywhere from small to large. And there's 73 species of these guys in Florida. They are kleptoparasitic nest parasites. Let's unpack that word. Klepto, I think we all pretty much know what that means. Parasitic, that, you know, we know what parasites are, nest parasites. That means, well, first of all, look at this one. This is a bee, not very hairy. And that's interesting. So you think, well, how are they going to collect pollen? Well, I don't know which came first, whether they decided I don't want to collect pollen anymore and evolution made their hair come off, or they just never did have hair, so they had to adapt to their lifestyle. Their lifestyle is they'll go in some other kind of bee's nest and take their pollen. That's just kind of what they do. And they will enter and lay their eggs and get the pollen that some other bee, has so diligently collected. So because they don't have much hair, because they're not pollen collectors, they're pollen appropriators. So they appear wasp-like. And one thing they do, I guess, because, it's so exhausting to go out there and try to get some pollen, they fall asleep on the flower petals. It takes all kinds of critters in the world. Here's our honeybees. Every other bee I mentioned up here, native, they're all native. The only gregarious or social bee in our native world is this guy, the bumblebee. All the rest are solitary. Well, who do we hear the most about? Of course, we hear the most about our European honeybees. They are naturalized, obviously. They are not native, though. So, what does exactly that mean? I'm sure if I met any kind of bumblebee out there, that bumblebee has been in America for way more generations than my family has, if you want to look at it that way. My mother's family came sometime after the Revolutionary War. My father's parents came over from Europe. He was a first generation. But that's not the way we look at insects. So they were not here prior to Europeans coming over. And the Europeans by then, beekeeping is just thousands of years old by the time they came over. You hear about it in the Bible, you hear about it in a lot of old stories. So they knew, they were going to bring certain crops over. And that's just what you did. You brought the honeybees to be able to pollinate them. And we still do that. They pollinate about a third of the food that we eat. They are extremely important, to our survival. But you're also finding out, research is being done to see if native bees can be efficient pollinators of food crops. We're going to be talking about attracting them with native flowers, some non-native flowers, plants. But, as far as agriculture goes, we do know about that. The southeastern blueberry bee does a real good job with blueberries. So we're going to try and find out, obviously they're going to be a big help in the pollination business. If you are, interested in beekeeping, the European honeybees, just also be aware, in listening to this, that what attracts our native bees is also going to attract your European honeybees and help them to create the honey. None of our native bees create honey, so they're not a commodity, but they can certainly be helpers and certainly keep our ecosystem going like it should. There are also bee imitators out there. Don't know if you're aware of that. There's some insects that look like bees, but aren't. Here in Florida, we have hoverflies. There's many different types of hoverflies, just like there's many different types of bees. So there's a whole group of hoverfly families. This guy is a fly, and they pollinate. They do a really good job pollinating too, but they kind of disguise themselves. Nature disguises them with these stripes to look like a bee. Why? Obviously for predation purposes. If I'm something that's looking for something to eat, not in the mood to be stung, I might leave a bee-looking thing alone. That's a survival tactic. Then there's this, which is not even in the bee family at all, even though it looks like a bee. And this is a very sad picture. He is attacking this honeybee. It's just, what this particular insect does. And so they are called bee killers. There's several different or type species of bee killers. And there is one called the Florida bee killer. It's not the only one we have in Florida, but we have those as well. And they are, a problem for people who want to keep hives, things like that. So there was a study done, and I don't have all the names of the researchers and everything, but it is in one of the publications that I direct you to. And I think you can answer this question without a long study, but you know how universities are, and you got to have things proven by the scientific method. So do native bees prefer native flowers? You probably say yes, and let's move on. But in the study that they have done, they have found some native bees are generalists. They're pretty good with anything that you got out there. Bumblebees, you can find them on just about anything. They collect and nectar from a wide range of flower species. But some native bees are specialists, like that blueberry bee that we discussed. There's a squash bee that we discussed. There's a Gulf Coast evening bee. And it's, only found in the sandhills, the scrub dunes and pines and scrubby flatwoods, and only wants the kind of plants, only nectars from the kind of plants that grow in those areas. So the study basically concluded that native plants are generally best for bees. That's not to say non-native plants can't provide, some backup for the native bees. So you don't want your bees relying solely on these non-natives, because there may be bees out there that do not recognize them. Some are just fine, don't eat everything, they're just like Mikey, but others are not. So, native is best, but you can always supplement it with a Florida-friendly, non-invasive plant as well. So let's get started. Let's build a bee garden. What are the basics to building a bee garden? One of the things is you should have year-round food sources, especially, in South Florida, where you can really have blooms all year long. We pretty much can in North Florida. There might be 3 weeks or a month, that we are kind of bloomless. But if you are careful and have plants that bloom in different seasons, and try to have at least 3 blooming plants, if not more, each season. And when I show you the plants, it'll tell you when their bloom times are. So, there's some planning that's going to be needed there. So you have things blooming all the time, or else the bees are just going to be like, blah, this buffet is empty, let's go somewhere else. Shelter is very important. And here is an example of one of those pollinator hotels that I discussed. Just like everything, there's good sides and bad sides to this. There is talk that, see, these are made of bamboo or hollowed out wood. And they often say to put special kind of paper in there so you can take it out after every time it's been nested in, because it can tend to attract parasites or bacteria, fungus, things that might be a problem. So as with everything, you do have to keep an eye on it. You can't just put it out there and forget it. And I know in Hernando County, our extension office pre-COVID was having workshops, actually creating some of these pollinator hotels. And I haven't heard if they're going to be doing that again, but you can call and ask, or I will call and see as well. As usual, it's one person who really gets that going. And anyone who's familiar with Hernando Extension probably knows who that one person is. And she's kind of busy too. So hopefully they'll, maybe we'll do some kind of combination and get that going soon. But you're looking at this and you're like, I see this all the time. I just didn't know. That's what it is. That's a bee living in there. So this is real easy. Leave parts of your yard unmanaged. Leave them alone. Leave bare ground. If you want to have a bee garden, then weed barriers, that's not going to work. If you want a bee garden, you've got to have some open dirt for them to be able to build in. I learned this building a wildflower garden. Even for the wildflowers, I put a little too much mulch on it, and the big chunky, pine nugget mulch, and I had to keep removing some of it because the wildflower seed is not going to spread that well on mulch. It needs bare ground. The same thing for the bees. So that's something to think about too. And leave some grasses or perennial plants, especially in the fall and winter, because they'll hollow those out and make nests in there as well. Water. Water, having a small fountain, and I'm showing this one because moving water, if you can arrange to have some kind of moving water, it doesn't have to be this fancy or this expensive. I know someone who is undertaking beekeeping of the honeybees, and she already had a fountain and a pond, and she says the bees just kind of line up on it, actually trying to get some water. They'll find water, but it is nice to kind of provide that for them. At the same time, moving water is preferable to avoid mosquitoes. You don't want to attract the wrong type of critters to your yard. Here's a neat little thing, and this is actually, I got this from a butterfly presentation, this puddling station, good for butterflies, and the bees like it too. So this is something you might want to consider, and this is pretty easy. They're using, a plant saucer. They put in a layer of compost, put pebbles on top of it. You could use potting soil, something like that. Put pebbles on top of it and then slowly added water. You don't want it to be a little pond, which will really attract the mosquitoes, but just something moist, still keeping an eye out on it. If you're going to do this and forget it's out in the yard, then reconsider doing it because you will attract mosquitoes. So if this is something you're going to keep an eye on, it creates just a moist area. And even that compost that you put there also creates minerals, things for them too. If you have an area of your yard that's a little muddy, just naturally kind of leave that alone and bare too. And they and the butterflies will go there to suck up the moisture and the minerals. If you're going to build a bee garden, I say this all the time, pesticides and pollinators do not belong in the same place. It's just not going to work out the way you want it to work out. And bees are already, threatened by so many different things, by all the land clearing that we're doing, by all the pesticides that we're using. So you really need to make the decision, I want a bee garden, I can't have pesticides around. If you have something like fire ants or something that are a major problem somewhere, spot treat only where they are. But in general, pesticides and bees, bees are not going to live happily in your home with all the pesticides. It would not be fair at all to attract the bees and then have your lawn company come and spray pesticides around. So really, really keep that in mind. And also be careful what you purchase. A lot of the flowers, in order to look nice for long periods of time, from the nursery to the truck to the home center, and not be attacked by whatever insects attack them, they have systemic insecticides built in them, as well as seeds do. Make sure the plants you get do not have that they're just pure plants. And right plant, right place, even that is the #1 Florida friendly principle. So keep that in mind. Healthy plants are going to equal healthy bees. And just also keep in mind that most bee attracting plants are sun loving. I will make a note of where the ones that will do okay in the shade. If it doesn't say that, then by default, it is sun loving. Bees like the sun, they like the plants that are out in the sun. Avoid hybrids or pollen-free varieties. Some people, they advertise pollen-free because it's good, better for your allergies. Some hybrids are okay, they recognize them, but some plants get so hybridized, such as roses, over the years that the pollinators have no idea that's a plant. There's nothing recognizable to that pollinator that's a plant that they should go to. So the more original the plant is, the better. They like flat flowers, places to land. You'll see pictures, that's not always the case, but they do prefer that. Or short to medium flower tubes. We do have long-tongued bees that will use those, but the real long ones, the tubulars, those are great for your hummingbirds. But your bees may have a harder time accessing that pollen. And plant diversity, I say this all the time, plant diversity is always the key to a healthy yard and a healthy ecosystem. So if you have 10 flowering species in your yard, stagger those bloom times, as I said before. So some of them, consider your yard the stage, and there's always a show going on. And sometimes these actors are on, it's their time. Sometimes it's the other actor's time, and sometimes it's the other actor's time, so that the show is always going on to attract these bees. And put different species together. Planting anything, even if it's the same species or different species, close together in mass is very important to attract those bees. Because if you think about it, they have one job, and that is collecting pollen and getting nectar for energy. They're tiny. Even if they're big, they're tiny. So moving uses up a lot of calories and a lot of energy. So it's expensive for their, an expensive use of their energy to have to move around a lot. So if we give them a big bang for their buck, we've got a whole bunch they can collect without expending energy, we have done them a big favor. Bees prefer white, yellow, or the blue/purple flowers. This is what one of the studies conducted, and you're sitting there thinking, I've seen bees on red flowers, and so have I, and I have a picture of them too. So, generally like bumblebees, we said they're generalists, but this is what the study, they put all these flowers out and then had grad students write the amount of times they saw bees on different flowers. So what won out was, the yellow, the white, and the blue or purple flowers. They are seen the most often. That's not saying don't have your red flowers. Your hummingbirds love your red flowers too, but maybe incorporate more of these colors to know that you're going to attract more of the native bees. And as I said, not only clustering, well, we lost you, Bobby, now you're coming back. Not only clustering different species of flowers together, or even the same species of flowers together, flowers that are cluster flowers on the same stem. Whew, mother load, that's even better, for the bee to save their energy. And again, they really like the daisy-like composite flowers, like up here with the broad petals. So it has a large landing pad. Here I have bees love DYCs. This is the same picture that was on our cover slide. And I said I would explain to you what a DYC is. It's kind of an inside joke. My colleague in Pasco County, a mentor of mine, Jim Mull, when he was in college studying horticulture, had to ID plants, ID flowers. So he and his other fellow students named certain groups of flowers DYCs, as in they were darn yellow composites. They didn't say darn, but this is a family-friendly show, meaning very, very difficult to ID. So bees love DYCs. They love those darn yellow composites, those daisy-like composite flowers. So just keep that in mind too. You may be thinking, well, I really don't have much of a yard. I have a very, very small yard. I'm, living in an RV park right now. I live in an apartment, or I just have a really small, I'm living in a mother-in-law apartment. Bees don't really care. They just love the flowers. And if you have a small space and can fill up containers with these plants that we're going to mention, the bees will be just as happy. So keep that in mind too, for anyone with the smaller spaces, that they can also participate in bee gardening. Let's start talking about the flowers. What time is it? Let's see. All right. The actual flowers. I know you're dying to see the actual flowers. So this is by no means exhaustive. Bees, you'll see them on pretty much any kind of flowers, and unless it has been overly hybridized. But here are just a few native plants to consider that when they performed a study at the University of Florida, the grad students filling out all the hash marks every time they saw a bee on a flower, these flowers really stood out as attracting the bees. So here is your partridge pea. I have this growing, this top one. I have this growing all by itself. I mean, I don't put it in my yard. It shows up every summer. So I leave it there, and the bees do love it. And the partridge pea blooms mostly in the summer and in the warm months. They're not quite up yet, but they'll be coming up. Then this tick seed. This is our state wildflower. It says Coreopsis leavenworthy. There are other varieties of Coreopsis that are, also native to here. So don't get hung up on the leavenworthy part, but make sure it's, a Florida native. And it will bloom in the spring, summer, and fall. And I have these in the ground and in a pot. Perfectly happy. Tampa verbena, sometimes called vervain. Tampa vervain, Tampa verbena. Obviously native to Central Florida, and it is that blue purpley color. I added the Spanish needle, the Biden's alba, wasn't on the publication I was reading, but maybe because it's a weed. But you go out there to that Biden's alba, to the Spanish needle, if you're looking for an insect, you'll find it on your Spanish needle. So yes, it's a very aggressive grower. You have to try and control it. And yes, it puts those hitchhikers, those stickers on you, but the pollinators love it. So I have to keep some around. Here's some others. These all three are in my yard. The swamp. The other thing I'm going to do here is, if there are no bees mentioned, we are going to assume they attract a diversity of bees. I wasn't going to write diversity of bees after each one. That would take up a lot of words. So just like if it doesn't say anything, it's a sun-loving plant. If it doesn't mention bees, it's going to attract all kinds of bees. So this swamp, or this narrow-leaf sunflower, it blooms in the fall. It's great for right around Halloween and Thanksgiving. That's when it really does its thing, and particularly attracts the leafcutter and the longhorned bee. Our beach sunflower, great ground cover. We talk about it a lot. It'll bloom all the time until it freezes, and then it will come right back and bloom again. All these little yellow flowers, look at this tiny bee I had on there, are about the size of a 50-cent piece. They particularly attract leafcutter, longhorned, and sweat bees. And the scorpion's tail, this is just me showing the flower. It has like long stalks on that the flowers are on. They, obviously attract a lot of a diversity of bees because I haven't mentioned it, and they bloom until it'll freeze, and then it'll start to come back. Here's some others, the native flowers that bees love, blazing star. Again, that grows naturally around my yard, blooms in the summer and the fall. Here's the sunshine mimosa. This actually a friend of mine planted as her lawn. And that was one of the pictures that we saw in the cover and the other slide that we had. And let me see if we can go back to that because I want to point out here. See this yellow on the edge of all of those pom-poms? That's pollen. Those are each little pollen balls. So yeah, they like the flat composite plants. But when you got something like that's just showing off the pollen like that, they'll definitely be there. And this spreads very nicely, too nicely for some people. Depends on where you put it. I have a hard time getting it to too much of anything, but I know at our Master Gardener nursery, they, are not quite fans of it because it has spread too much for them. But it is a great bee attractor. And this spotted bee balm grows naturally around my yard. As you can see, the bumblebee loves it. Naturally around my neighborhood, I should say. I am concerned. Bumblebees are declining in population, and I can see why. I can watch it happen as this spotted bee balm comes up in the summer and fall. I see the bumblebees all over it, but every day a different lot is being cleared in my neighborhood. So, who knows what happens, that the spotted horsemint or the bee balm gets covered up and, we have less and less of it. I try to plant more of it in my yard to try and make up a little bit, but it'll attract the bumblebees, the sweat bees, the leaf cutter, and the honeybee. Hence its name, bee balm. There's some more natives, BlackEyed Susan here. There's all different types of BlackEyed Susans, and they will attract your leaf cutter, your longhorned, and your sweat bee. And they bloom spring, summer, and fall. They're blooming right now. They're starting really to come up. The salvia attracts this is going to attract hummingbirds too, but also a lot of your long-tongued bees. You'll be very happy. And there's many different types of salvia. This is the native scarlet salvia. There's non-native salvia out there as well that the bees and the hummingbirds just love. And they'll bloom and bloom and bloom until they freeze, and they'll freeze to the ground and come right back for you. Here's a nice native starry rosenweed. I think it's kind of underused. It gets a little tall, maybe 3 feet tall or so, and it blooms in the spring, summer, and fall. It's another one of those, here we go with our GYCs that the bees love. We also have blue-eyed grass. That's down here. It's actually an orchid. It's not a grass. Again, it's that blue purpley color that the bees love. These are coming out right now, all over in roadsides, maybe some undeveloped areas as well. And then you have your Elliot's aster, which blooms in the fall. And they love that. They love to be all over that. All kind of bees do. Here are some non-native flowers that bees also like. Now, here's their penta. Remember I told you? You'll see them on red plants. Yeah, I took this picture, and apparently this bumblebee has not read the books or the studies telling it should only like yellow, white, or purpley blue flowers. But then again, we know bumblebees are generalists. So it's perfectly happy with that red penta there. Here we have yellow bulbine. This is the second picture. It also comes in orange bulbine. blue days. Zinnias are one of our few annuals that I guess have, you know, even though there's many different styles, colors of them, the bees still are very happy and recognize all of the zinnias. Might not happen with a lot of our annuals because they have been so hybridized and so treated, but zinnias are still holding strong with the bees. So if you want to think about some annuals, zinnias are really the thing to think about. And of course, our blanket flower, which has been kicked off the native plant team, but still a fantastic wildflower for our bees to have. And again, the bulbine will bloom in the spring and summer, and the honeybees really like it. The blue days has year-round blooms. Pentas blooms in the spring, summer, and fall. Zinnias bloom in the spring, summer, and fall, and your blanket flower blooms till they freeze, then they come back. And they particularly attract the sweat, the longhorned, honey, and the leafcutter bees. There are trees out there that attract bees too. Red maples do a good job of that, and they bloom in the winter and spring. Our friend, the Chickasaw plum, is becoming more and more popular among native trees. As I mentioned before, if I don't mention where they do best in the sun. So this Chickasaw is an understory tree. So if you have some native areas, obviously it does well in the sun, according to this picture. And this is a local Hernando County picture, just taken a month or so ago. But it also kind of might be okay with a little bit of shade. And your cabbage palms, well, they grow in the shade or the sun or anywhere. And believe it or not, the bees are attracted there to their teeny tiny little blooms. Now some native woody plants that bees love. Here's your beautyberry. Anytime now they're going to be coming out with either white or this light pink flowers. And they're probably all your beautyberry, if you have them, are leafing out. And anytime they're going to start with these flowers, which will then turn into the beautiful purple berries. But the bees love them. Florida privet just looks like a hedge, but it attracts, native bees. And it will have a type of a bloom that blooms in the winter and spring. And different hollies. There are native hollies, there are non-native hollies. There's hollies right outside our building that have bees all over them, all over, where they're flowering right now. So that's another great bee attractor. Your beautyberry is one that can do okay in the sun or the shade. Other native plants, woody ones, we kind of have this out of order as what's written here, but here's the wild coffee. That's a shade plant. That is a pure shade plant. So that's something, to really think about getting for those shade areas and still attracting the bees. And it blooms in the spring and summer. Don't confuse it for the invasive coral ardesia. They actually look completely different. So make sure, that you can go to a native plant sale, native plant nursery, get the wild coffee with my favorite Latin name, Psychotria nervosa. And I just found out they've created a dwarf variety again. So be careful because, the more, even with native plants, if they create other varieties, may not be as attractive to the bees. But the dwarf variety, the name they gave it, and if it has a cultivar name, the native plant people will tell you, be careful of cultivar names because the pollinators may or may not recognize it. But again, look at the, the Latin name, Psychotria nervosa, because of it being wild coffee. The dwarf's cultivar name is Little Psycho. That's just something I learned while putting this together. Your saw palmettos out there. Most people want to come and take those all down. This is mine blooming. Doesn't look very much like blooms, does it? But that attracts the bees, and it blooms right now in the spring and in the sun or the shade. Your Walters viburnum, great, great, great native shrub, blooming right about now, might be near the end of its bloom time. It can handle shade. I've seen it, you know, in the woods, in understory places. So, and in case you're wondering what, because that's how you'll look at it too. Well, somebody nicely did a nice close-up, someone from Wikimedia. That's flowers close up. And look, there's a honeybee right there. So you might want to second guess your opinion of your saw palmettos as well. Climbing aster, you know, does get pretty woody, blooms in the summer and fall, again, like the other aster, the Elliot. Bees will be all over it. I caution you about the wisteria that you get the right kind. American wisteria. The Japanese wisteria is an invasive exotic. Probably you would not be able to purchase it, but you might, your neighbor might have some and try to pass some on to you. So be very, very, very careful with the wisteria that you get, the American native wisteria. But the bees do love it. And both of the, well, the climbing aster is the summer and fall. And the American wisteria is the spring and summer. Here's some non-native woody type plants that the bees also like. This bush daisy, again, it's a DYC, a darn yellow composite. They love those. Your bottle brush tree, a lot of people have those, and probably sea bees all over them, because those, you know, those small hairs, just like the sunshine mimosa, just really holds on to the pollen for them. And this chaste tree blooms in the summer. It's supposed to smell very similar to a lilac. You know, it's a very nice tree to have. So that was a quick wrap up of a few of the plants that can, or that have been proven to attract your native bees. And in the same time, they're going to attract our European honeybees as well. Here are some of the resources that I utilized. As I said before, this floridawildflowers.org. You go there and go to their bee section. They have great information written, you know, University of Florida, I always promote them. They have the best information out there, but sometimes some of the resources you find are like researchers talking to each other. So this floridawildflowers.org tells you all kinds of information about the different types of bees, speaking more in everyday language. So I found it very useful. And I haven't really promoted the IFAS bookstore. That's a University of Florida resource where you can purchase items. So they have a book, Pollinator Friendly Gardening. They got lots of books. They have some Doug Tallamy books too, if you're looking for those. They have, oh, I have the same thing twice, but they have a book on bees. And I happen to have it right here. Here we go. Our Love of Bees. Beautiful, you know, book to show to kids and even for you to look at. Just wonderful book about bees. And if you get, you can get just the book, or you can get a package together with this guy. Isn't he cute? So he's been listening to this whole program and telling me if I'm, you know, staying on the right track or not. Him and the fire extinguishers here listening to me. We have upcoming classes always. So next Wednesday, same time, same place, same format, Zoom. But I'm going to let Dr. Lester do most of the talking because he has a great class he put together on I Spy Something Out of Place. And he's going to be talking about all those weird things in Florida that shouldn't be here, non-human things. Such as the tegu lizards or other type of invasive species. And if you see one, and when you're done screaming, to know where the, who to report it to. So I think that's going to be a fun and interesting class. On the 13th, we will not have an online class because I will have an in-person class at the Spring Hill Library called Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Your Florida Lawn. That will be repeated here though online on the 27th, in case, if you can't make it to the library. And on April 20th, a virtual class on recycling inside and out with our recycling coordinator, Carmen Bruno. And we have rain barrel and compost bin classes pretty much twice a month. If you are in or around Hernando County on Saturday, the 23rd, please join us for our first annual Earth Day celebration. I'll be there. Dr. Lester will be there. Carmen Bruno, the recycling coordinator, will be there. It's at the Hernando County Master Gardener Nursery. So there will be Florida-friendly plants for sale. There's going to be a native plant expert on hand, kids craft table. We're going to have actually a workshop, a pollinator workshop, and that will be held by a master gardener who is an entomologist. And we also have a fun thing, a professional photographer will be taking you around, if you're interested in that workshop, to the different flowers, insects that you find in the nursery, showing you how to get good pictures of them. So either bring your camera or she'll even show you on your phone. So that I think is going to be a really good time. Thank you for joining me today. And here's my email again. It's LillyB, LILLYB @hernandocounty.us. You can email and ask for a PDF of this program. You can email me and ask really hard questions about these bees, and I will send those right to Dr. Lester, who is the entomologist, or anything you'd like to discuss. We will be glad. We'll be glad to share with you. And so I think we've gone a little bit over our hour, and I thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you again next week for another Florida-friendly landscaping program.